Hi and welcome everyone. If you're here to learn about teacher leadership in Denver, you're in the right place. Welcome to you all. My name is Alexander Russo. I'm a freelance journalist and I'm very happy to be moderating this panel. We're all going to learn some really interesting things from the administrators and teacher leaders that we have up here. I want to start out by saying thanks to Kate and Zach and the TFA Summit team for putting this together. It's been a really smooth and interesting process, so thanks to everyone for that. Some of you may be inclined to tweet or to watch others who are tweeting. I wanted to direct you to Zach's Twitter handle, since he is on fire with the Twitter. It's one of the more interesting Twitter handles I've come across lately. Zero, Z-R-O-W-E, zero. So that's a zero at the end and a zero at the beginning. And of course, TFA, hashtag TFA25 will get you both what's going on in here and what's going on in all the other lesser panels going on right now. So, there are lots of really interesting things going on in Denver, including a district that's so stable that the superintendent can go on a leave of absence without anyone really worrying about it. And teacher leadership is one of the most interesting things that is going on in Denver and a handful of other places, and so that's what we're all here to learn about. I assume I have seen a bunch of Colorado current and former Colorado folks around at the summit the last few days. You want to raise a hand if you're Colorado affiliated so we can, oh nice, excellent, great. I also wanted to get a little bit of a sense of who we have in the room, just so we know maybe where you're coming from or why you're here, and we can tailor our conversation towards what's most interesting to you. If you're a current full-time classroom teacher, would you mind raising your hand? Great. If you are a site-based administrator, school-based but not full-time classroom teacher, would you raise your hand? Great. Is there anyone here who thinks of themselves as a district or a CMO administrator or type of person? Great. And then last but not least, nonprofit, advocacy, funder person. Great, okay, nice, we've got a great group here. So, I am going to introduce the panelists, and then I'm going to sit down and we're going to get a PowerPoint presentation up here. The lights will go down for the PowerPoint part of the presentation. And the topic here is really important. It's not just a curiosity or an exception. So many people are forced to do all of one thing or all of another thing. And what Denver's figured out how to do with this teacher leadership program is to let people do two things and give them enough time and space to do what sounds like a good job. And that seems like a perfect life, to be able to do two things rather than one. I, in a perfect world, would teach half the week and do education journalism half the week. There is no such spot. I'm waiting for Denver to create it. But the idea of being able to develop and push your talents in two directions is one that's really fascinating here, and an important one, especially when it comes to school effectiveness and teacher retention and the teacher development process. So I'm going to first introduce the acting superintendent for the Denver Public Schools, who's going to tell us about this program, and then I'm going to introduce the teacher leaders and administrators who are actually in the schools doing the work. So let me start out now by introducing Acting Superintendent Susan Cordova. You want to come up?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Susana Cordova, and as Alexander said, I'm the acting superintendent in the Denver Public Schools. And we are really fortunate to be able to share our experiences with teacher leadership and the work that we've been doing with our Teacher Leadership and Collaboration program. As we mentioned, we think teacher leadership is really a critical component of our strategy to have great schools in every neighborhood. And the reason that we think that it's really critical is because we know that we have incredible talent in our classrooms. And we have people who are really hungry to be able to give more than what they're currently doing in their classroom, but are very invested in the time that they spend with their students and don't really want to leave the classroom, or not at the point where they want to think about moving into school leadership roles. And so what teacher leadership and collaboration allows us to do is to create a job where you can lead without leaving the classroom, where you can magnify your impact. You're doing great work in your classroom, and you can actually have influence on your colleagues to increase the impact beyond just the 25 kids you serve in an elementary or the 120 kids you serve in a secondary school. It also allows us to ensure that there's more real-time coaching and feedback to all of our teachers. And it helps us think about how we build great teams for every school in service of a great school in every neighborhood. When I started teaching in 1989. I was motivated very much by a mission of equity and social justice. Came out of college as a first-generation college grad and started teaching in a neighborhood very similar to the neighborhood I grew up in. The majority of the students I served spoke Spanish as their first language and were learning English in school. And I was really excited to join this great profession. And I found out very quickly that it was lonely for me. I spent a lot of time with kids. I didn't spend a lot of time with adults. As I progressed in my career, I feel like I became a much stronger teacher, but sometimes at the end of the week, I could count on less than one hand the number of times I had meaningful interactions with other adults. Lots of meaningful interactions with my middle school and my high school students, but not always very much interaction with other adults in the building. When I became a school leader, I thought that it was going to be really different, and I found as an elementary school principal, it was an incredibly lonely job again, that I didn't have an assistant principal in my building. I worked largely alone, and this graphic, we feel like, really sort of demonstrates what schools traditionally have looked like. There's one principal. Sometimes you might have an assistant principal, sometimes you don't. In my case, as an elementary principal, I had 350 kids, no AP. As a teacher, you may have a grade level team, you may have a department team, but largely you're getting feedback only from your principal. And when I was a teacher, I definitely had the experience of seeing my principal in my first couple of years teaching once or twice a year for observations in my classroom. And then as a school leader, really struggling to figure out, how do I get into classrooms on a regular basis when I have 30 teachers that I'm responsible to coach and evaluate? And so that's traditionally what the classroom experiences look like for teachers and what the school leadership experiences look like for principals. What we're trying to do is dramatically rethink that. And so instead of seeing that wheel and spoke that I just showed with all the teachers pointing directly to one school leader, we really want to think about the principal in a building. Having teams of teachers who are supported by teacher colleagues who help the team come together, the team work on team issues, and do that direct coaching support for teachers within that team. So it changes the job of the principal, but it dramatically changes the job of a teacher to be able to have the kind of support and feedback in a much smaller group with somebody who's got the time and the bandwidth to actually invest in your growth and development as a teacher. So really important. We also know that there frequently are people for whom there's not an easy team to figure out in the building. Think the gym teacher in an elementary school, or think the one French teacher in a high school, or the jewelry teacher, or the special education teacher, who frequently sort of stand out by themselves within a school setting. In this model, it really looks at how do we create regional teams where PE teachers from a region can be on a team, have a team lead who can coach and give them feedback in that way. And so it's really this idea of how do we build the teams that are small enough and supportive enough to help all of our teachers grow right in their classrooms. So when we think about what teacher leadership and collaboration roles actually can be defined as, we always start with thinking about first our teachers. So we'll look at this graphic from the bottom up. We have our teachers, and every teacher in a building, we would like to make sure that we've got the right kind of support for them. Some of that support is going to look like our new teacher ambassadors, people who are working with our new teachers as they come into our buildings and ensuring that they have the support that they need as they transition into this profession. We want to make sure that we've got team specialists, think like a grade level chair maybe might have been, somebody who's able to support the effective collaboration on that team, that we have a resident mentor, the person who's giving the one-on-one instructional leadership to aspiring educators taking part in our teacher residency programs, people who are becoming teachers. And so they're the mentor in the classroom working with people just taking their first step into education. And then our regional team specialists, those folks who I just mentioned are working with people not just in their building, but outside of their building as well. And then we also think about taking a step up to the folks we call our senior team leads. These are people who are actually doing direct coaching and feedback and support of a team of teachers. They help lead grade level team meetings. They co-plan and co-teach with teachers. They observe and give feedback to teachers. They're responsible for the growth and support of the team. And the work that they're doing with their colleagues actually helps feed the growth plans, the development plans, and the evaluation of those teachers. And then, of course, we still have our APs and our principals in our buildings who also have team responsibilities, both for, in some cases, teams of teachers, and for the senior team leads as well frequently are part of the principal's responsibility to make sure that they're getting the coaching and support they need, both for their classroom work as well as for their coaching that they're doing for their fellow teachers. So this is what our teacher leaders do. They support things like teacher planning time. Very intentionally, we're trying to create structures where we're not just looking at the planning of what's going into a lesson, but we're also looking at what's the impact of the planning, and we do that by looking at student work. They're conducting observation, feedback, coaching for their teams, supporting first-year teachers, and bringing together those special teachers, as I mentioned before. We have a lot of reasons that we believe are important, the objectives that we're trying to meet with this project. The most important one is we want to make sure that we're supporting teacher growth. We think about teacher growth up and down the spectrum as we think about the career of a teacher. From the very first time a resident is thinking about getting a teaching license, so pre-service work is really important when we think about growth and development of our teachers. But we also want to think about our most senior teachers and how we're supporting the growth and development of our most senior teachers. We believe that it's really important for us to be doing this as a team. And to be breaking down some of those silos, some of those historic barriers that teachers have felt, the isolation in the classroom, and so really thinking about how we are smarter together in teams rather than having to reinvent things over and over individually. Another really important outcome for us is we believe that this helps us attract and retain strong teachers, that there are very talented people who, in the absence of a program like this, will take their talents, their gifts, someplace else, either outside of their school or even outside of the profession. And we want to be able to have the kind of opportunities for people to do the work that they love, but still have those growth opportunities. And then we believe really firmly that the model where there's one principal supervising, 30 or 40 teachers is a functionally impossible model. And so this idea of distributed leadership is really important to us because we believe it really is the only way that you can have the reach and the impact that we need to make a fundamental difference in the kind of outcomes that we're getting with our students. As a district that serves predominantly low income, largely students of color, we know that we need to dramatically rethink what it is that we're doing if we want to be the kind of place where every school is a great school and where every child succeeds, and we believe this will accelerate our progress to do that. And so this is just another way of looking at that same slide I just shared a minute ago. It's for people who are more visual learners. It really does help us think about changing these structures around support for new teachers, observation, feedback, coaching, and evaluation, the strong teams of teachers, and distributed leadership. In the short term, we think that it'll help us grow and develop our teachers. It'll help us retain teachers. The intermediate outcomes that we believe we will achieve was that all students who are taught by effective teachers in joyful, rigorous, and personalized classrooms will increase, and that will lead us to that outcome of every child succeeds, such an important piece of the work that we're doing. And this didn't just start with us doing teacher leadership and collaboration. It has its roots in a lot of the work that we've been doing to help improve the efficacy of our teachers in their classrooms. And so prior to 2010, I want to make it really clear, we have always had teachers who are leaders. We have not always had very structured opportunities for them to use their leadership. And so starting in about 2010, we formally named a Teacher Leadership Academy. And this was a way for us to start growing the expertise of our teachers, both in content, new standards, as well as in processes and structures for professional learning for adults. We then used that work that we did in growing, starting with about 200 and then growing to about 800 teacher leaders who were working full-time in their classrooms, but growing in their expertise. We started the differentiated roles pilot, where teachers began looking like what I'm talking about here, the senior team leads. We started small. We really started with about 14 schools in 2013. We jumped that up in the next year to 40 schools. This year, currently, we have 71 schools. Next year, we're projected to have 115 schools participating in this project, and by 17-18, we hope to be at full scale across our district, so that all of our district-managed schools have the Teacher Leadership and Collaboration Project going on, with the impact being there is more support for every teacher in their building. And so here are some of the outcomes that we're seeing in the results of having teacher leadership and collaboration in our building. This is something I think we really are very proud of, because as we started introducing this, we initially got a lot of resistance. There's a lot of support for coaching. There's a lot of support for the idea of having colleagues who help lead team meetings. It's a big step to go from that into saying it's that and it's observation, feedback that feeds into your teacher's evaluation. And so we're really proud of these results. We see that 84% of our teachers who are on a team believe that teacher leadership and collaboration is a positive innovation. For our team leads, 98% of them believe that they are growing as leaders because of the responsibilities they have. 85% report that their senior team lead is successful at both evaluating their teaching practice and coaching them to improve. Really important, because it's one thing if you get evaluated well, but if you don't have any support about how to get better, that's not the purpose of evaluation. We want to make sure that it's really growth focused. And then 89% of the teachers who are on teams say that their practice has improved as the result of working with the senior team lead. And so here are some of the things that our teachers are saying as they work with team leads. I'll pause for a moment and let you just read a few of these quotes, because I think they really are pretty meaningful. And another thing that I want to share is we do faculty meetings. The superintendent and I go into every school every year, host an open session for all teachers to be able to just give us feedback. We ask for lots of feedback on this particular initiative. And in one of our schools, it was really fascinating to hear both a teacher who was on the team and the team lead talk about the experience. And what the teacher on the team said was, this has really been powerful for me, because I know that when my teacher team lead is in my classroom, she's not asking me to do anything that she herself is not doing. And then the teacher team lead said, it's really true, because I may go from in the morning doing a session with a teacher where I'm observing them and I'm getting ready to give a feedback session and talk about what they just saw, what I just saw in the classroom. And then in the afternoon, I go teach in my classroom, and my principal comes in and does the exact same thing with me. And so the idea that this is really about everybody is working on growing and getting better in their practice, I think is a really important piece of the work that we're doing, and why it has so much credibility with both our teacher team leads who are doing this work, as well as with the teachers who are on these teams. And so we have found it to be very transformational. We definitely have some growing pains. There are definitely places where people are feeling like, some schools where they're feeling like, I have really novice teachers, I'm not sure if I have somebody yet who's at the point where they can take on the responsibilities of being a senior team lead. And so some of the work that we're doing is thinking through, how do we have the development opportunities within the school, and when does it make sense to recruit from outside the school as well, so that you can have that support for teachers. We know it makes such a big difference for the experience while we're in a classroom. And so we want to make sure that we're thinking about how is it that we support the different pathways to have more teacher leadership and collaboration in all of our schools to be able to do that. And so that really is what the program looks like in a nutshell. I'm going to turn it back over to Alexander, and we'll introduce our fabulous senior team leads and school leaders who we have here with us today.
Thanks, that was great. That was really helpful. We're now going to have a little bit of a panel discussion. I'm going to ask a few questions of the teacher leaders and the superintendent. My goal is for all of us here, myself and all of you, to feel like you really understand what the team lead concept looks like, feels like, whether you're thinking about doing it yourself, if you're in Denver, whether you're thinking about something along the same lines in another district, another part of the world. And then we'll have questions from all of you. So please, whether you're from Denver or not, if you have a question about how it works, I really want everyone to leave here with a pretty clear and concrete understanding of thinking that they know a little bit about the day, week, month, and year in the life of a team lead. So, by way of introductions and sort of grounding the audience in who you all are, I wanted to start out by asking you, starting with you, Liz, I wanted to ask you all, and we'll just go down the road for this first question, to tell us who you are and what school you're at, and how you came to be involved, so your origin story in terms of the teacher leadership program. Liz, you want to go first?
Sure. My name is Liz Gorka, and I teach for Denver Public Schools at North High School. And I came to be a senior team lead last year, I think because I felt very strongly that I was not ready to leave the classroom. Working with students is my favorite part of my day, and it's what I love so much about this work. But I was ready for a new challenge. And I also, in my first few years of teaching, felt very, very lucky to have had such great mentors help me along the way and give me really good feedback and their time and develop my practice. And I wanted to be able to give that back to other teachers in my building, especially younger teachers who need a lot more support and a lot more help as they're starting out with this work. So transitioning from being a full-time teacher to being a senior team lead allowed me to do both of those things. I was still able to teach and work with the students who I love, but I also was able to spend time working with my colleagues and really sharing what I had learned and helping them develop their practice and their skills in the classroom.
Blake Hammond is next. Blake, you've got an interesting background because you've been both a team lead and now are an administrator.
Yes.
Tell us about yourself.
So good afternoon, everyone. I just have to say it's extremely exciting to see so many of you all that are excited about teacher leadership, and I just commend you for it. My name is Blake Hammond, and I'm an assistant principal of John M. S. Elementary School in Denver Public Schools. Within my time being in DPS, I've started off as a full-time teacher in the classroom, and then I've moved to a teacher leader, and while I was also in the classroom full-time. Then I became a senior team last year, and then this is actually my first year as an assistant principal. So I've actually been able to see the trajectory from starting in the classroom full-time and all the way up to the assistant principalship. One of the things that I will say, particularly about my pursuits for teacher leadership, I remember being in the classroom and being impacted, kind of like what you said, being impacted by mentors and being impacted by other teachers and learning so much from peers. So of course I would be given feedback from an administrator or an assistant principal or a coach or a dean, but it wasn't as frequent as I felt like I needed it my first couple of years. Being next to somebody that was a master teacher or a teacher that had a lot of experience was very beneficial to my practice. And I felt like after I got years of experience in the classroom that I also could not only impact my own classroom, but then impact all the classrooms around me. And so that's one of the reasons why I definitely felt like I wanted to become a teacher leader. Now, in my first pursuits where I was a teacher leader as a full-time classroom teacher, it was pretty difficult to get outside the classroom. You know, as you all can tell, we have a lot of responsibilities. And one of the things that was really appealing about Denver's program for teacher leadership to where you're out of the classroom part-time is that you really get the opportunity to coach others and coach fellow teachers. And so the impact, when our superintendent was talking about it, magnifying the impact, I definitely feel like that is something that our program accomplishes.
Great. Jenna Nelson, where are you now, and how did you learn about and decide to become a team leader?
Hi, I'm Jenna Nelson. I was a 2008 Corps member back when it was the Denver Corps, which is now the Colorado Corps. After 6 years of serving as a classroom teacher in 2nd and 3rd grade, I heard about the teacher leadership opportunities within DPS, and I applied mainly because I was really curious what it would be like. After 6 years in the classroom, I was half thinking about leadership work, thinking about coaching work, while also still really loving a lot of the parts of working as a full-time classroom teacher. So I thought it would be a great first step into leadership and coaching and supporting teachers. I currently am a senior team lead at Teller Elementary in DPS, where I work half-time as a literacy intervention teacher, and the other half of my role is supporting teachers in 2nd and 3rd grade as the senior team lead.
Great. Gerardo Munoz, tell us about yourself and how you joined the program.
Okay, I'm Gerardo Munoz. I have been in DPS for 36 years because I graduated from Denver Public Schools, class of '94. It's my 17th year as a teacher, and when my principal approached me about taking on a senior team lead position, I said no. And I said no because I felt that I couldn't be persuaded, first of all, that leaving the classroom in any capacity was going to be good for kids. And second of all, I couldn't be convinced that I could lead. And it was tough, and we had many phone calls over the course of about a 36-hour period. And I think what happened to me is I had to sort of come to grips with this idea that 17 years of teaching and being an engaged member of my community actually meant something and actually could be shared with other people. And so for me, I go into this work assuming that I don't know as much as I need to know. And so the true learning is to happen from the students and from the teachers. So I'm very thankful that I'm working as a senior team lead at the Denver Center for International Studies. It's been some of the most important growth for me as a person, and I would venture to say I've really helped support a lot of teachers who often aren't as supported as they need to be. So that's been my sort of big growth point there. I don't feel like I could ever leave DPS. It'd be hard for me to be as invested in another district because I remember what it was like being a student there.
Glad you said yes.
Yeah, eventually.
There are, as you saw on the PowerPoint, there are about 250 team leads and senior team leads. Superintendent Cordova, do we know anything about the demographics of the folks involved in the where they are in their careers? Anything about that?
Sure. Yeah, so great question. When we look at the demographics of our senior team leads, let me talk first about our teacher leaders in general, because
Sure.
there are a lot of different ways that people can be teacher leaders in the Denver Public Schools. We really try very intentionally to make sure that our recruitment efforts really mirror the recruitment that we have overall. And one of the things that we know in the Denver Public Schools is we have a long way to go to ensure that we have a teaching force that looks more similar to our student population. Right. And so we do look at the demographics of our teacher leaders to try to make sure at the minimum they're mirroring the demographics of our teachers. We do see very similar ratios as we look at that. Our senior team leads tend to be more veteran, obviously, both in terms of having the experience and the expertise to be able to do that. So generally, not always, but generally these are people who are 5 to 7 years and above.
Right.
We have people, in fact, a really similar story to Gerardo's, a 20-year veteran teacher who said, I've learned more in this year as a senior team lead than I feel like I had in the previous 10 years that I was teaching.
So even if you're
Yep.
outside of the 5 to 7
Yep.
window,
Yep.
you can still do it and
Absolutely.
still find it useful.
Absolutely.
Great. I wanted to see next if we could get a little bit of a grounded TikTok day-to-day sense of what it is you all do. Liz, would you mind starting out and giving us a little bit of a sense of what your day is like? It's sort of the going back and forth. It's sort of a foreign concept. Usually, jobs are out of the classroom or in the classroom. Could you take us a little bit through a typical day and tell us about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I'll say about my days is they are busy, and they are very challenging, and they are very rewarding. So my classes that I teach fall on the first and the sixth period of our day. So those are the times that I am in the classroom with my students. And during the rest of my day, I split my time between observing teachers who are on my caseload or on my team, and planning feedback conversations with them, coaching them around their practice and towards their professional goals and their student growth goals. And then I also spend time meeting with my principal, who is working with me on my instructional practice and my coaching practice. So it really is very busy. Like, every moment is filled, and it can be challenging to switch your hat, so to speak, to go from being in front of your students and clicking your brain into your lesson plan and what you're working towards with your kids, to then thinking about going into a civics classroom where you are working with a teacher around a particular goal that they've set for their students, or on an assignment that they're working towards, to then changing gears entirely and going into a reading intervention meeting where you're looking at student data and you are talking about what those students really need to be successful, and working with that teacher on lesson planning, to potentially modeling a lesson for another teacher in an entirely different subject where you're teaching their kids, because that's what they need in order to grow in their practice or towards their goals that they're working on. So it is definitely, it takes a lot of flexibility, and you need to be able to kind of shift gears, but it's very, very rewarding to see teachers become more confident in what they're doing and really have a major impact on the students in lots of classrooms across the school.
Jenna, could you tell us a little bit about your day as well? I'm curious about whether how much of the day you're in either your own classroom or someone else's classroom. How much of it is classroom time, one way or the other, and also about the hat switching.
Sure. So I've been in this role for 2 years, and last year served half-time as a classroom teacher. So my full morning was spent teaching and planning as a third grade teacher, and the afternoons were spent coaching and supporting our first and second grade teachers during their math instruction. So my schedule was designed so that my release time would be during the content area in which I was coaching. This year, my schedule is a little bit different as a reading interventionist. This year, I teach 3 reading intervention groups every day, and then the rest of my day is kind of similar to Liz's, where there's a wide variety of things that I do, and my days are always very packed. So I might be facilitating a data team with one of the grade levels I work with. I may be modeling instruction for a teacher. I may be doing an informal or a formal observation on a teacher, writing up feedback and debriefing with them. I may be collaborating with other senior team leads at my school to plan a professional development. There's really a great variety of things every day, just based on the needs of the teachers I'm working with and the needs of the school.
Sounds exciting. Gerardo, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think my school is on a rotating block schedule, so over the course of a 2-day cycle, I teach Advanced Placement World History. I'm a 9th grade advisor, so I have a crew of kids that I'm going to take through to graduation. And I just jotted down some things. So it could be I'm observing Aaron and helping him in his economics class put together some sort of global trade simulation. Dave and I go and co-observe something. He really wants to work on academic dialogue, so I identify teachers and secure resources to allow him to see this happening in action. I also have the drama teacher and the art teacher, so that has required a lot of study on my part and just kind of understanding what things look like in their classroom. In particular, the drama teacher is very focused on equitable access for kids in her classroom who wouldn't maybe necessarily take a drama class or get excited by a drama class. There are PD things I think have been mentioned on the panel already, hosting mid-year conversations, student work protocols, and I'm also in a unique situation. It's very meta, but I'm actually the evaluator for one of our other team leads. And so when he and I work together, we talk a lot about leadership between the two of us and about how he can grow as a leader as well. And so the three of us who are team leads in my building actually spend a lot of time putting things together and actually bouncing ideas off of each other. And it's overwhelming work. You could ask my wife how tired I am when I come home some days. But it's every minute of the day feels productive, feels busy, feels meaningful, and you walk away really feeling like, okay, that was a lot that I did right now. Let's see what teachers need. So it's a combination of having some good structures that work for you, but also being really, really responsive to your team and to the kids in those classrooms and what they all sort of need. So it's busy. It's definitely busier than I thought it would be.
Sounds fascinating. The idea of the team leads working together and evaluating each other in some situations.
Yeah.
That's something you don't always see in
Nope.
schools.
Nope.
Blake, I wanted to actually ask you to talk a little bit about something else.
Okay,
If that's okay. You've got a unique role in that you've been a senior team lead and an administrator.
Yes.
And one of the most unique features of the Denver model is the evaluation component. It may not be the main thing that team leads and senior team leads are doing, but it's certainly part of it. And you've crossed over.
Yes.
And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm always a teacher at heart, so I always feel like I'm a full-time teacher at all times. One of the things that I've noticed as the big difference, particularly in the caseload that I support, we're very fortunate at my school to have 2 assistant principals, so we have caseloads of about 15. When I was a senior team lead, I had a caseload of about 5 to 6 teachers, and so naturally, I probably meet with my teachers once every 2 weeks as my assistant principal caseload. But when I was a senior team lead, literally, I was meeting with my teachers very frequently, almost up to 2 times per week, which I felt was phenomenal. When we think about that actionable feedback, being able to go into a lesson, witness something, and provide that immediate feedback, I definitely felt like it was absolutely stellar being a senior team lead. As far as the evaluation component, as a senior team lead, one of the things that our school typically did is we focused on particular indicators. So if we felt like a teacher really needed specific focus on checks for understanding or needed an emphasis on increasing rigor within the classroom, as a senior team lead, I could really spend most of my observations and most of my debrief times specifically coaching that particular teacher on that one individual skill. So it wasn't that I would coach them on it and then leave for a month and then come back. It was literally I would coach you on it. I might model a lesson. I might teach. I might observe another lesson. I might watch your class while you go observe another teacher that's strong in that particular skill. And then we come back and just really debrief all the processes. So that was a little different as far as the assistant principal realm, where I have more people to support, which I think is really drastic, is a significant drastic difference to kind of that evaluative piece.
Great. One of the other things that's unique is that you're sharing, if I understand correctly, you're sharing the evaluation role with your senior team lead, right?
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about how that worked, sharing when you were a team lead, and then how it's working now that you're an assistant principal?
So I actually can't answer that question, particularly as being an assistant principal and having the senior team lead, because my school is in full implementation in the 2017-2018 school year.
Okay.
But I can kind of talk about my experience in the past. So one of the things that I would do is I would go into a classroom at the beginning of the year with my principal, and we just really figure out where their teacher was at together to ensure that we were calibrated. So we would go in, we would say, this particular teacher really needs strong support in X, or this particular teacher needs strong support in this particular skill. And so we started off the year with my principal sitting beside me and just creating a plan of how we were going to particularly support this teacher intensively, which I felt was great. And then when I think particularly for the aspect as far as the evaluative piece, I was the main evaluator of that teacher, and I was the main coach of that teacher, but I received my feedback. I received constant feedback from my principal from above, increasing my skill to be a leader.
Liz, how's it worked for you at your school, the blending of the coaching and evaluation and the sharing of the evaluation with the principal or the AP?
So the way that it works at our school with the principals and the assistant principals, they handle coaching and evaluation for the senior team leads and for a select number of teachers who they work with. But the senior team leads are responsible for coaching and evaluation for the teachers who are on their team. And I think that this can be kind of difficult because we are peers, in a sense, to the teachers that we're working with. And you know, I think all teachers are open to coaching and to getting feedback and to having the support, but it can be difficult when you have somebody who teaches next door to you who is giving you a score that is tied to your performance and your evaluation and your job, your career. But I think the way that we kind of have tried to overcome that challenge and work with that is acknowledge it, but make sure that we are not prioritizing the evaluative part of this role over the coaching and the growth and the support aspect of this role. So the teachers who I work with, we're working in coaching cycles, learning cycles, where the teachers are collaborative in setting goals for themselves with their coach, with their senior team lead, in addition to the goals that we've set as a school. So teachers have a professional growth plan. We have a school-wide goal, and then teachers have a personal goal, and all of that is driving towards student achievement. So how are we really keeping the end in mind and that impact that we want to have on our kids? And when teachers know what they're working towards and when they are receiving the support that they need to get smarter in that area of their practice, then the evaluation doesn't feel like a gotcha. It feels like it's something that they are working towards, and then they are being recognized for how they've done with that. So the learning cycles that we are operating with right now are about 4 weeks long. At the beginning of that learning cycle, you set a goal with your teacher, and then over the course of the next month, you have time to work on that and to try things and to take risks without any punitive measure attached to it. So we wouldn't score an evaluation during that time because we're working on growth and coaching and support. And at the end of that cycle, after all of those pieces have been in place and the teacher has been able to try different things and see what works and see what doesn't work and make adjustments, then there would be that evaluative piece. And it doesn't feel like a surprise because we've been working towards that the entire time.
Right, very interesting. Gerardo, how does that match up with the evaluation sharing and the process at your school?
It's been great. Part of this was when I first applied. It was known as a differentiated roles pilot, and so for me, the word differentiated really sort of comes into play for me more than anything else. There are certain teachers on my caseload who respond super well to scores. I go in, I evaluate a couple of indicators, I score them, and then we go in there and we don't have that kind of uncomfortable conversation. The conversation can be, okay, I felt like I was kind of low in this area, let's talk about how I can strengthen myself there. As you all can probably imagine, not every teacher responds that way to scores, right? The scores can be a very emotional thing for a lot of teachers. So what I've been able to do is actually come up with different types of teaching and learning and evaluation cycles that we do together. So a lot of it sounds a lot what Liz was talking about. But it's my freedom and flexibility to say, you know what, for 2 weeks, we're going to engage in a learning cycle. We're going to co-observe. I have an article that's really short that I want you to read. I can co-plan with you. Let's go through a little bit of co-teaching, and at the end of this cycle, then we'll go to an evaluation, and then the hope is that they are teaching in a place where they had hoped to be teaching to begin with. And so that's a really great thing. In terms of working with administration, I would say we had a principal who came from out of state, and when you have an out of state sort of leader, there's a lot to learn in that kind of environment. And so part of what we've all been working through at our school is just where does distributed leadership happen? Where does all this kind of play out? Is it just in instructional questions? Are there professionalism questions that get addressed? Where's our voice appropriate when it comes to governance questions and that kind of thing? And ultimately it runs pretty smoothly. There's a big leadership team that meets weekly. I think that the three of us who are team leads at our school feel that our voices are just as valued as anybody else's in that room. But it is a lot of, like, we're kind of in uncharted territory here, where even when you have had teacher leadership positions in the past, sometimes there's a very clear unspoken line that you can lead in this way, but you cannot lead in this way. And I'm very fortunate in my school to have my voice valued in most leadership decisions, even those things that are not directly in the classroom. So.
Superintendent Cordova, I wanted to ask you whether this sounds like, when we're talking about evaluation and that new, delicate, interesting role, what you're hearing here, does it sound like what you have heard or seen around the district, or what you're hoping is happening in schools around the district?
No, I think it is very similar. Probably the piece, and Gerardo touched on it a little bit, in the schools where there's less appetite for this program, it really is, I think, more around this fear of, both on the part of teachers who would be on a team as well as on the part of somebody who would be the team lead. Like, how do I step into this space where somebody I'm sitting next to in the faculty lounge is suddenly a person that I'm responsible for evaluating, and sort of that
Right.
sense of the unknown of stepping into this, this very new area. What we find, it almost feels like the hardest step is that first step.
Right.
Because what we find once people are actually doing this is that the opportunity for more feedback, for more learning, for more support is so much more beneficial than the fear of getting a score attached to it. And I think part of what you can hear and what people are talking about is, these are people who know how hard teaching is, who do it part of the day themselves, and when they're coaching, it really is from this perspective of, how can I help you get better? The goal is not to be a gotcha. The goal really is, how is it that we can problem solve together to get you stronger? And I think that that initial step into it is the hardest step. Once people are living it and doing it, I think we find it to be overwhelmingly popular, both for teachers on the teams as well as for the team leads.
And just so we understand how the process works thus far, did schools volunteer?
Yeah.
Were they volunteered?
Yep.
Did
So-
teachers, or were teachers involved in the decision to be part of the pilot?
Yeah, it's very much a school-based process. When we started, we intentionally started very small, so 14 schools the first year that we did it. We've tried to grow in a very intentional way, but it really has been based on school conversations. Our goal is for all schools to be participating, but we very much understand that there are readiness factors that need to be in place, and forcing this onto schools is not, we don't believe is in our best interest. It's not in the interest of the teachers. And there are real reasons why people feel like they're not ready yet. We're looking also at, like, what if a school doesn't feel like they're ready yet? What do we need to do to make sure that they get more ready, so that it's not suddenly a jolt when they are deciding to take that step? And so it might be interesting to just hear what a MES is doing around that readiness work,
Right.
to make sure that we are in a position where it's a project that can work.
Right. We'll definitely get to that. Jenna, I wanted to ask you a little bit about how the program came to your school. If you can remember where you first heard about it, and how much time there was to learn about it between hearing about it and it happening. And then also, if you could address some of the issues of fears or concerns that came up either at the school-wide level or with individual teachers.
Sure. So our school began with the differentiated roles program last year, so we're currently in our second year. And the program was something that teachers were open to trying, so they were okay with trying out the pilot. And I would say they were cautiously optimistic that it would be a good support for teachers in our school and an opportunity for some of the teachers within the building to develop leadership capacity. And throughout the past 2 years, we've kind of refined the individual roles to best meet the needs of our school. So, for example, last year, we thought about our UIP goals in terms of which is the Unified Improvement Plan, so that's a Colorado thing, but it's basically like a school improvement goal. And we made sure to tailor our roles to best support the goals of the school, and that's something we again did this year. So teachers can see the connection between what they're working on and how the roles of the teacher leaders are shaped, which I think is definitely something that has been powerful for our school. And what was the second part of your question?
No, that's fine, actually. Is there,
Okay.
is there anyone else who wanted to weigh in on the introduction, overcoming fears part of the process?
Yeah, just really briefly, our school, we have a pretty tight-knit teaching community at our school, so these are teachers who can't get enough of talking to each other and collaborating around ideas and those kinds of things. I see some smiles in the room because I think we probably have some of those individuals here. I think the question of evaluation was kind of that uncomfortable piece initially, where even people that I consider to be pretty good professional friends of mine said, so like evaluation, how's that gonna work? And so, you know, I made, and we also got some great training. I don't think that question has been broached here. We had some really fantastic people who helped us get ready for the role of teacher leadership and evaluation. It isn't just that they gave us a measure and said, here, go do it. It's a pretty in-depth training. If you want to learn about the LEAP tool, a lot of us will be around to talk about that. But that sort of conversation is inevitable, and it's probably the least sort of comfortable conversation to have. But I would say that all of this work is relationship-based. I think everybody on this panel would agree with it. And the first year we did it, we did opt-in, and with huge sort of satisfaction results. As Acting Superintendent Cordova said, we're going to go largely to a model where this is the way that professional learning and evaluation is done in schools. So you can imagine there are going to be some teachers who maybe would not opt in if it was up to them. So those, and I have a couple of those teachers on my caseload who are very sort of resistant to the idea. But I would say that building that relationship is so crucial and so important, and without it, it just doesn't work. So my experience has been that building positive relationships and really letting know that this person trusts you, that you have their best professional interests at heart, it really, really goes a long way to smooth those tough conversations when the scores come in a way that maybe they were below what they were hoping.
How many of you, it's interesting to hear also about the opt-in opportunity at the school level. How many of you are at schools or have been at schools that did the opt-in approach, or did most of your other schools do the entire school?
We did, but we don't do it anymore.
Is opt-in not available anymore?
Not in my building.
Not in your building?
Yeah.
Right. Did anyone else have opt-in in their buildings, Liz?
In past years, we have had opt-in, and I found that teachers who did opt in were very happy that they did, because when you have, at this point in time, it was, we had peer evaluators who were coming in from the district to give our evaluations to teachers. And so they were not necessarily familiar with our students or with our school or with your classroom or with you and your practice. But if you have a senior team lead who is your evaluator, they know what's going on in your school. They know some of the kids. They have an opportunity to be in your classroom more often and know more about your style of teaching and your practice and what you're working on. And it feels better, I think, for teachers to have somebody who is evaluating them who knows what's going on in their building. And that wasn't the case at this point in time when it was opt-in, where we had outside people coming in and it just felt very disconnected.
Did anyone else have opt-in or thoughts about the opt-in?
Yeah, so at my school, we actually, or the school that I was at prior, we didn't have an opt-in model, but one of the things that we were definitely cognizant of is receiving a lot of feedback from our teachers about what they felt about the implementation of the program. So we created our schedules of where our senior team leads, who they would be coaching, who they would be supporting in particular grade levels, and we just put it on the table of our senior leadership team and school-based teams and just said, provide us feedback about this. So it was definitely a process that was very unique to our school. It was also a process that never felt like it was forced upon us. It was all of the teachers in the entire school continuously providing us feedback on the process. And that's one of the things that our superintendent mentioned that I thought was stellar, is that it's school-based. We all know that our schools are very different. We all know that our schools are very unique. And so at my current school, we felt like next year wasn't the year to start this particular program. We wanted to begin to plan and just start, surveying our school to kind of see what they felt about this program. Next year, we're actually incorporating team specialists. So they won't be teacher leaders that actually have full-time or half-time out of the classroom. They'll be like teacher leaders in the aspect of full-time teachers, and they'll be grade level leaders. They'll lead facilitation on professional development days. And then the following year, that's when we'll go full implementation. We just wanted to ensure that our teacher leaders for next year started receiving training over the summer, so going through cognitive coaching, ensuring that they were going through relationship training, just ensuring that this is something they actually wanted to do the following year. So it was a very intentional process that we're going under.
You wanted to say something about the opting in?
Sure, and this is less about the opting in and more about how each school creates the right plan for the right time. So we also have had schools where, our goal is to have every school have senior team leads and every teacher be on a team of no more than 6 to 8 so that you get that support that we're talking about. But we have lots of schools that start off with 2 senior team leads. And so they'll have 2 teams, and then the principal and the assistant principal will continue to do the evaluation for the rest of the faculty.
Like a mixed model.
And so it's a little bit of that. It's less like opting in, and maybe we've got a really strong primary teacher in an elementary school, and so she's going to be the senior team lead for the first and second grade. But we're not going to ask everybody to do that. We're going to get the best possible experience to start, get that buzz going,
Right.
And then build it out on a timeline that makes sense for each school.
So there, if I understand what you're saying, there are both over time and also school by school, there are different ways to adopt or implement the program.
To initiate it, to build it out, and to bring it to scale.
It's fascinating. I've got a couple more questions for the panelists, but I bet that some of you have questions that I am not going to be smart enough to think to ask that would be really helpful to the group. We are going to or have passed around cards, which you can write down a question, and I will try to get to some of those questions. And please do. It could be an important question that you know the answer to, or it could be a question that you're curious about from your school or from your district if you're outside of Denver. These 2 gentlemen are passing them around, and if you want to raise your hand, if you want one, that would be great. Okay, in any initiative, while they're doing that, I've got a couple more things I wanted to ask you, and thank you so much. This is so interesting. I'm learning so much. In any experience, especially a new one, and especially one that's innovative or non-traditional, there are things that you wish you knew at the start, and have figured out maybe to do a little bit differently or want to do differently next year. And I was curious if I could get some of you to talk a little bit about how you thought about the role of the team lead at the beginning, and maybe what you've done differently or wish you'd done differently from the start and have since adjusted. Liz, do you want to start with that one? Would you mind?
So this is my first year at North High School. I've previously been in another region of Denver, and I was a senior team lead last year as well. But my experiences have been very different. So I think that something I cannot emphasize enough, and Gerardo talked about this earlier, is the importance of building relationships with the teachers that are on your team and that you're working with. And I would say that this year, that is something that I didn't prioritize as much as I should have at the beginning, and the first semester was really bumpy, especially when it came to the evaluation piece. And so it's taken a lot of conversation and a lot of time to kind of work through that, where I think if I had spent more time at the beginning really getting to know the teachers I was working with, getting to know more about like what they value so much about the work that they do and their students and their classroom and their philosophy, that would have gone a really long way. Whereas last year I didn't have to spend the time doing that as much because I was in a community and in a school where I had been for a long time, and so a lot of that was naturally there. But I think in talking about rolling this out into schools for the first time or transitioning into a model like this, it's really, really important to spend a lot of time building relationships and really emphasize that with your teachers.
Can you, that's helpful to hear, and thank you for the confession, the candid confession, right? Can you tell us what form would that have taken, or could that have taken, if you could roll back, or if you were going to do the year again? Are we talking about parking lot chats? Are we talking about going for a run? What kind of relationship building would you have tried as a new teacher at the school?
I think I would have spent more time in classrooms, and I think I would have spent more time listening and less time talking. And I would have spent more time conducting observations to learn about the teacher's style and to learn about the students in the classroom and to learn about their practice and what they value in terms of instructional strategy, and asking them to share some of those things with me instead of jumping straight into like observation and feedback mode of like, here is what I know effective teaching to be, or here is what we know is best practice, and watching a lesson and then coming up with an action step. But I think at the beginning of the school year and at the beginning of these new relationships, really taking time to listen to teachers and to get to know what they want to work on and what they're seeing from their kids and what their experiences have been with evaluations and coaches in the past, because a lot of those past experiences color the mindset that they have currently.
Right. Does anyone else want to talk about things they wish they'd known or changed? Jen first.
Yes, I think when I began the role, I saw a huge part of my position as the evaluation and observation side. And I think in my second year as a senior team lead, I have been pushing myself to think about all the other things I can do with teachers to both build my relationship with them, build their investment in the work I do, and ultimately support them in being more effective. So I've done a lot more co-teaching with teachers, a lot more co-planning. Last week I spent every morning teaching guided reading for a teacher who didn't know how to teach guided reading. I think taking advantage of the flexibility within our schedules has been huge in terms of leveraging myself as an instructional leader and improving the practice of the teachers I work with.
Great. Gerardo?
Yeah, I would say, I think the first thing that I would say is that I would not have just trusted my ability to build relationships to take me 100% of the way I needed to go. Every single person on my team is somebody that I get along with, that I have a very good professional relationship with. That doesn't always translate to their being open to your scores. And so I wish I had sort of kept that in mind and just kind of said the relationship will change now that I'm in an evaluative sort of position. And then the second thing I wish I would have done was to lobby a little bit harder with my school's leadership to really try to build team capacity. We've talked a lot about what the one-to-one coaching and evaluation looks like, but part of the vision of this program is also, you don't just work in teams in the sense that everybody just answers to their senior team lead. You're supposed to work in teams in ways to support each other, create collaborative structures, share best practices. I mean, there are all those kinds of things. And I think our administration struggled with what PD would look like if PD is done in small teams as opposed to the traditional Wednesday afternoons, 3 to 4:30, everybody doing the same thing. And I kind of backed off on that belief that I had, that we really needed to take a differentiated approach to PD. And I wish I'd kind of lobbied for it, because the one kind of complaint that I've had from both of my teams the last couple of years has been we don't get enough time together. We don't get enough time to work together, to really observe each other in practice, to really be a team. One thing we've done, though, among the team leads at my school, we started doing this monthly Donuts with DRs, which stands for differentiated roles. And so what we do is we give out invitations, very nice invitations, and we say, hey, all three of your team leads are going to be in the same room with nothing to do for an hour before school. Stop by, get a donut and coffee, and leave, or stop by, get a donut and coffee, and have some conversations about some pressing issue of practice that you had. The first time we did it, we had half of the staff show up. And then the last time we did it a couple days ago, we actually had to send one of the team leads out to get more donuts, because we had almost the entire staff pass through saying, hey, I need my checks for understanding. I'm struggling. And academic language and math, like how do I do that? And how do I perform well in that area? So we've been able to kind of recover a little bit of what we're doing, and it's funny because the admins will kind of pop by and be like, so how's it going? We're like, you can go. We're good. There's some good conversation going on here, because we want to protect that space where teachers can be really transparent about what it is they're struggling with, questions that they have, and then make it a really welcoming environment. So,
Great. You wanted to say something about
I just wanted-
lessons learned, or
Yeah, I think,
wish you'd knowns?
yeah, I think and you hear it here, some of the emphasis on the evaluation piece is not by accident. I think we led too much with that. And we really are trying to say, this is about how you grow strong teams. And strong teams really are about the support systems. And it's important that we have the built-in portion of it that's about the outcomes piece. But we'll never get there by an emphasis on outcomes. We'll only get to where we need to be through an emphasis on support and growth of teams.
Great. Okay, I have some great questions here. And we're going to do this as a lightning round.
Okay.
Okay? Which, as I deem it, is I'm going to ask a question. Some of the questions are the same. I'm going to ask those of you who asked the question on the topic to raise your hand, so there's some question asking accountability. And you don't have to, of course. You can deny that the question is yours. And then I'm going to ask one of you, just one, for these questions, because we've got a bunch of them
Brief and to the point.
to respond. But I want to let you know, if your question doesn't get asked, or if it doesn't get answered in a way that satisfies what you're trying to learn, please come up afterwards. The panelists are here, and I'm sure would be happy to talk. And also, Kate and Zach are here, and so we'll make sure that anything you want to know about this program, you get to know before you leave, or have an email or a website. Okay. A bunch of these questions have to do with impact on student achievement. Raise your hand if you asked a question about student achievement. Really basic question I should have asked myself. Great, I think that one goes to you. What has the impact, if any, been on student achievement at the schools using the model?
So we're early in, and this is probably the best answer that we have. What we find is that our schools that have teacher leadership have the highest levels of engagement. When we look at engagement, we see that schools with high levels of engagement also have higher levels of student achievement. So that's the value chain that we're looking at.
My related question is, have the evaluations changed in any marked or notable way since the team leads have come into the schools?
Yeah, great question. So one of the things we were worried about was, if you're a colleague sitting next to somebody, are you going to inflate their scores because you have to live with them as a peer? We haven't seen that the scores are inflated, and we have seen that scores, how teachers are evaluated overall, does correlate to how well their students are doing.
Great. There are a bunch of cards about, I'm going to call it about workload or work balance, balancing the classroom and the team lead model. You want to raise your hand if you asked a question about how to survive being a team leader? Here's a good one. How does your role affect your ability to be effective and grow in your own classroom? You have enough time to plan and reflect on your own practice. Someone else said, this sounds like 2 full-time jobs to me. How do you pull that off? Jen, you want to go for that one?
Sure. I think just like when you're a teacher, you have to be extremely organized. You have to be extremely organized in this role as well. So a lot of those same skills come into play. You have to just prioritize what needs to happen in that day and schedule your day around it based on the needs of the teachers you're working with. I would say my actual work days are extremely packed. Like I'm constantly moving from one place to the next. But at the same point, I don't bring home as much work as I did when I was a full-time classroom teacher. So it's kind of a trade-off.
Great. Blake, there are a bunch of questions about retention. Do you think the program retains people in the classroom or in the school? Have you seen or heard anything about retention of teachers?
Yeah, I actually have a lot of friends who have purposely stayed with Denver Public Schools because they are having the opportunity to lead. It was actually a hard choice for me to step into the assistant principal realm because I absolutely loved the senior team lead approach because I was beginning to step outside the classroom and have more responsibilities. So I think retention has been strong. I don't know if our superintendent can talk about the specific numbers.
Do you want to say something about
Yeah,
specific
no,
numbers?
and it definitely is having an impact both on keeping people in the district. Sometimes they may leave their school for a senior team role, but we are seeing a very positive impact of, you have to be rated effective to
Right.
be a senior team lead.
Okay.
And we are seeing that was a group of people that we want to make sure we're intentionally developing retention efforts around them, and so it's a great way to keep them.
Are there a bunch?
And I also think about attracting. So
Right.
we're really excited
right.
to begin to implement the program at our school because we think it's going to attract some really strong teachers to be leaders in our school. And I think that would have positive effects on our students.
Yes, we recruit from all over,
Yeah,
just so you
Colorado's
know.
beautiful.
We're
Colorado's
hiring
beautiful.
right now.
Denver's always poaching.
It's a great place.
Always poaching is the Denver motto, right?
Yes.
That's right. I would also add just one anecdotal story. I had a teacher assigned to me last year who I was warned a little bit. The administrator was like, listen, this teacher's really struggled. The scores haven't been great. And if you don't want to take this person on, like, that's fine. Let me know. I say, yeah, I'll take him on. We have a good relationship. And at the end of a year working together, he said to me, and he had been considering actually leaving the profession. He was feeling very frustrated. He said, and I wrote it down, because of our work together, I'm excited to keep teaching. And that is probably the most meaningful thing I've ever heard from somebody that I've worked with, that because of our work, I'm excited to keep teaching. I can only imagine that these guys have had the same impact on the people they're working with.
There are a couple of questions in here about costs and stipends. Liz, how many millions of extra ducats do you get? And
She doesn't have anywhere to keep all the buckets.
And
So many buckets.
if you happen to know who pays for the extra money?
So up until next year, the money has been coming from the district, and so it is an extra stipend if you are a senior team lead, on top of whatever your normal salary is. And I would definitely echo what Jenna said about I take home less work, and so I'm not taking home a giant extra check, but it's still work that I love, and it's nice to have that recognition to continue to grow in my leadership skills and still be in the classroom. And I do feel like I have a little bit less grading to do, so that's really nice also.
So that was said with very politely. So used to be back in the day, national certification would get you $5,000 or $10,000. Do you mind saying what the stipend is for the team lead?
Can I tell? Yeah. So the senior team lead stipend is $5,000.
And you
Extra.
stay on the same contract track for
Mm-hmm.
years
Yep.
and degrees and everything else.
Yep.
From the big perspective,
Sure.
how is the district paying for this?
Yeah, so schools have a little skin in the game. It's about a third from the school, 2/3 from the district. The way we're affording to do this is we're trying to use previous functions that would have been central office support positions and pushing those as close to schools as possible. And so that's how we are funding the district portion of it.
Right.
Schools then are funding it through their school budget, the third that belongs to the school.
And is there a looming cliff? Do you run out of federal money or something? Is there a point at which you can't do
Yeah,
this
so
currently, or are you set up to do this?
We largely are funding this with district general fund dollars.
Okay.
It's something that we believe really strongly in, and so that's part of the reason why we are doing it this way. This spring, we're kicking off a conversation with the voters of Denver around a mill levy to have a dedicated funding source for teacher leadership.
There are a bunch of questions about what are the prerequisites and the process for picking or self-nomination for being a team leader in the Denver model. Gerardo, would you tell us a little bit about how it works, or what makes what you would look for?
Yeah, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I'll do my best. When I first started, it was sort of informal. Like I said, my incoming principal called me on the phone and said, "I hear I need you," and I said no, and she said, "I really need you." I said, "Okay." But what I understand now is that when I applied, the first requirement is you had to score effective overall as a teacher, and that would be common sense, right? So on that kind of leap indicator, I would assume that's still part of it. And then it has gone to, I think, a full HR process. So the positions have to be posted. People apply through the system, and you interview with your personnel committee within the school. As far as I know, am I getting this? Oh, I got it right. And I think that's it. Is that it? Mm-hmm. I think that's it.
There are a couple questions here related to different sizes or types of school. What happens when you've got 100+ teachers? I'm assuming that's a big high school or something like that. Blake, I'm giving you this a hard one. How do you coordinate, or how does it change, or how would you imagine it would change if you have one school that has 1 or 2 or 3 team leads and another school that has 10, I guess theoretically 10 or 20?
Sure.
Yeah.
Particular to the number of senior team leads in the school?
Yeah.
Okay.
How does it work when you've got a big team of team leaders, I guess is the question.
Yeah, so one of the ways that we did it at the school that I was at prior to the one I'm at now is we had 3 senior team leads, and so Harrington had about 400 students. And so the way that we did it is I was a senior team lead, and I taught 4th grade, and I supported 5th grade, and I also supported 3rd grade teachers. We had another senior team lead who taught 3rd grade, and she would support our 2nd grade teachers, and she would teach our 4th grade teachers. And then we also had another senior team lead who taught 1st grade and would support kindergarten teachers, and then also support 1st grade teachers, or 2nd grade teachers. So it's a different mix. It kind of depends on particular individual schools of how you want to ensure that your senior team leads are coaching specific people. But it's actually, I believe it's per pupil in the school. Per teacher in a school. So some schools, if you have a larger population of students and larger population of teachers, you're allotted more senior team leads for that particular school.
Great.
Yeah, we always try to get a 1-to-8 ratio of senior team leads to teachers regardless of the size of the school. So a big high school, Liz was just saying her high school has 4 school principal and APs and 6 senior team leads.
Wow. Okay. Liz, how about, this is a tough one, if you don't mind handling it. Scheduling. How do the classes that you still teach, how do those get scheduled? Do you teach fewer sections? Do you share classroom responsibilities, like a job share? How does it work?
So when you take on the senior team lead role, you need more release time in order to coach and observe the teachers that you're working with. So we have 7 periods in a day, and I teach 2 of those. So I teach 2 classes, and I still plan and grade for those like I would normally.
Right.
And then the other 5 periods it's time that I have to observe teachers, coach teachers with meetings and conversations, do co-planning, meet with my principal, meet with the other senior team leads.
Is that standard across the schools that you teach a reduced load, you don't
Yes.
share?
Yes.
Yeah.
So in our elementary schools, sometimes people job
Right.
share, so
Right.
that Jenna was the morning and somebody else did the afternoon.
Oh, got it.
Sometimes in our elementary schools, they might be the interventionist, so they're not a traditional classroom teacher, but they're serving students.
Right.
And so each school looks at the model that makes the most sense for themselves.
A couple of the questions, these are great questions, you guys. A couple of the questions have had to do with legislative or political obstacles or roadblocks. I can imagine what there are work rules within the schools, obviously, and then there are legislative and policy issues at the district and the state level. Since we're focusing as much as anything on the schools, were there any challenges to existing work rules or school practices that your team lead implementations had to deal with? I'm not getting a look from anyone, so I'm going to guess the answer is no. Do you
No,
wanna-
and so the only legislative thing was actually part of our educator effectiveness work at the state that
Right.
allowed teachers as observers to contribute to evaluations. That had already taken place
That had
before.
already taken
Yeah.
place. What has the role been of, is DCTA the
Mhm,
local?
uh-huh.
Well, what's the role of DCTA and the team lead rollout and at the school level? Do you have chapter presidents or chapter leads?
Gerardo should answer this.
Yeah, I used to actually be a DCTA representative. I think both programs were designed in collaboration with DCTA at the district level. So the LEAP evaluation tool was done as a collaboration between DPS Central Office and DCTA leadership, as was this differentiated roles piece. So I think that's been absolutely key, actually. It's been a really important partnership, and maybe we wouldn't assume that could happen, but I've spent almost as much time talking to our DCTA folks as I have to my, now I can't think of the guy's position, my connection within the teacher leadership office.
And could you have been both a DCTA rep and a team lead?
Sure.
Really?
Absolutely, yeah.
These are all teachers.
No, I
Yeah,
understand. I just
yeah.
wondered whether the demands of the job were just
Oh, I
too big.
know.
Oh, well, that's a different, I wanted to say is, it's, in terms of time management, 17 years teaching is the first time I've ever actually bought a planner and used it, because it's been crazy that way. But yeah, it would be a lot, and I think part of what would need to be sorted out is how that relationship is viewed. If you're a representative with your local, and you're also in administration meetings, you're also having conversations that a lot of the other teachers are not privy to, I think a conversation around the implications of that would be really important, but there's no reason why, aside from time management, couldn't be done. I usually log about 40,000 steps over 2 days. Just keep that in mind.
They give
Keep
out
on
a
doing
they
that
give
kind
out a
of thing.
Fitbit when you get the
That's
job, right?
That's right. I was like, I have to see.
I would like to thank you all myself, Acting Superintendent Susana Cordova, Liz Gorka, Blake Hammond, Jenna Nelson, and Gerardo Munoz. Could we all give these folks a hand for...
I'll plug the happy hour. Yes. I just have to give a quick plug for our happy hour this afternoon. We'd love to have as many of you as possible come to our happy hour, 4 to 5 at RTD. So hopefully we can connect there.
Excellent. Thanks so much, and thanks again to all of you for the great questions, and to Kate and Zach for organizing this. Thanks a lot.